Hello, friends. We are beginning today a most important and interesting and difficult discussion on how can there be peace. Peace in the world, peace in a region, peace vis-a-vis communities and countries, peace within the countries, peace within communities, peace among communities, peace within the family, peace within the self. Because in the end, our Eastern philosophies tell us that to be at peace is the bliss, not the money, not the achievements, but in the process of living in a world which is full of conflicts. How can one live at peace? Now, this subject is discussed from philosophical point of view. It is discussed from the point of view of leaders like Martin Luther King for peace among the black communities in USA, Mahatma Gandhi, whom he followed, who started a movement against apartheid in South Africa, which then became the African National Congress, which rules till today. And relatively speaking, South Africa is better than other countries in Africa, which has 54 countries now. Most of them were earlier colonized. Colonization itself is for economics, is for some countries or people of a country, and this was mostly Europeans and Japan, who went and acquired the resources, created the administrative system for exploitation. And some of these things are very well documented, including Japanese colonization period of Korea. The indigenous people who were subjugated and put in little reservations in North America, Australia, New Zealand. In large countries like India, which were not combined together at that point of time, and slowly the Britishers colonized India. And in each case, the exploitation is the main purpose, including bringing the new infrastructure like railways, was to take out the raw materials and bring the finished goods at an expensive price. French did it in the whole of the Francophile Africa, 13 nations today, where coups are taking place one by one now. So, the fruits of this kind of exploitative colonization, they come maybe after 50 years, 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, which includes slavery. And African slaves were a commodity to be taken and made profit on. And the slave traders of that time became the financials later on. Now, if we see in a quantitative sense, there are a number of areas of the world which are not at peace. Even USA, which is the most powerful, is not at peace because it has conflicts with increasingly China, with Russia, and has earlier done attacks on Iraq, Libya, Iran, and so on. Now, if we connect it to the resources, and we just take latest example of Niger or Mali in Africa, the French were taking away yellow cake, the uranium, at 0.8 EU per kilogram. And after the French have been pushed out, it is fetching them 140 250, no, even more, 214 EQ per kilogram. So the extraction of gold, diamond, ivory, other rare materials, oil, is done at a very low price, and those companies of those exploitators do it. Now, this generates conflicts. This generates conflicts where certain areas which are oil bearing, for example, Eritrea in Ethiopia, that the colonizer creates a problem or aids the problem or gives the military equipment to the people who are fighting and then acquire the resources once the Eritrea becomes separate. Middle East, if we take, has been full of these problems of conflicts. Saudi Arabia has been able to manage it by signing a blank check with USA for making their oil in purchases in oil, trading in oil in dollars. And all those accumulated dollars are invested in bonds of USA. They are not even allowed to invest in real estate or stock market and so on and so forth. And in this context, therefore, US has got 80 bases throughout the world and 24 bases in Africa. Now, one would ask that why so many bases are there in Africa? Niger itself has a base with 2,000 people, with 2,000 military men, and it's the drone headquarters for Africa. Yes, now there is a pressure. The very presence of these military bases is a parameter in the equation of either keeping the peace or generating conflicts. Now, looking at the Middle East, Iran, in the early 1950s, there was a democratic government, leftist or socialist, we can call it, which the Prime Minister at that time, Masgada, tried to nationalize the oil, and the US and UK, primarily UK, had interest in that. So they had got some organization like the MI6 or the CIA to create a disturbance in the area, demonstrations, and he was assassinated. And USA brought back the son of the earlier king, Shah Pahlavi. And Shah Pahlavi was all right for some time, but he became worse than the dictator later on, and became completely pro-West, and there was a movement against him, and Mr. Khomeini, Ayatollah Khomeini, came in the 70s. But all this process started because the oil resources had to be captured. Similarly, in Africa, most of the colonizers have not developed those countries, and some infrastructure which is developed is to take out those resources, and therefore all major resources of Africa are in the control of the colonizing governments or their companies. Now, coming to Asia quickly, in Middle East we start with, and since the Balfour Declaration 1917, when Jews started percolating in the area of Palestine, or it was Transjordan or whatever political entity we want to call it, and slowly when in the United Nations a resolution is passed based on the Balfour Declaration, which was a homeland for the Jews and a homeland for the Palestinians, or other than Jews, and other than Jews could mean the Christians and the Muslims and other religious affiliations. Now, before that they could settle, there was a war. There was a conflict. And since then, till today, people are talking about the peace process. In that peace process, number of things happened. Yasser Arafat of the Palestinian Liberation Organization and Begin, the Prime Minister, shook hands. Camp David, some areas were given to PLO, for example, the West Bank, but the Gaza, they couldn't. There was an election in 2006. Hamas came. Hamas was a social service organization at that time. They set up schools, universities, hospitals, health centers, and so on. And they won the election. With the result, the two parties were not together. These were small territories, and the people were about 2 million now in Gaza Strip and 2 million in West Bank. And the Israelis started becoming stronger and stronger with the support of the Jewish groups who are generally very rich people, and they also control media. And so, if the media gets controlled, what story do you know? Most of the time, the story we come to know is that they are terrorists. Somebody asks, which are the terrorist incidents? Can you explain them? Difficult. Similarly, they say about Hezbollah. Now, Hezbollah, they say, is creation of Iran. Now, here we try to understand that Iranian are Shias, and some of the other Arab nations are Sunnis, and therefore there is a clash like that. So, I will not go into too much detail of it because we are going to have a few more case studies on the subject. To say that so many peace conferences, the Oslo Accords, before that, and the Camp David Accords, about, I think, countless, dozens of UN resolutions asking Israel to vacate the areas which they occupied in 1967, and the request of the Palestinians to settle them in the areas of pre-67 war, which will be about 22% of the original Palestinian area, and while they are more than 50% of the population. Now, these peace processes talk about, okay, shaking hand, forgetting the past, but then before the ink is dry on these peace accord, enough work is not done, and there are people, there are small groups on both sides which try to rake this up and so on. To the extent I was surprised, one of the very senior Israeli who is also pro-Palestinian, saying the answer is not in two-nation solution or three-nation solution or one-nation solution. The answer is in what Gandhiji said. Gandhiji had a non-cooperative movement. So why can't the Palestinians have non-cooperative movement? Why has Hamas, while criticizing it, attacked Israeli civilians? But then the Israeli government has formally done so many times more. More than 5,000 civilians are dead. Hospitals are destroyed. Health centers are destroyed. Water is stopped. Electricity is stopped. So on. How can they afford to get peace in a situation like this when even children will remember for whatever generations they live that how they were badly treated, and they were refugees, and they have been treated as not human beings, as the deputy, as the defense minister of Israel said, and then there are not enough people who can quieten down the situation, because US, which has the say on Israel, has taken 2 warships there with few thousand aeroplanes there. So they are party to it. They are supplying advanced, as they say, ammunition to Israel. They have decided to give $16 billion compared to $4 billion they have been given for last 10 years. Now, this is the cost of peace. If there was a peace, this 40 plus $6 billion would have been used for social services. Today, it's the cost of conflict. There are human beings, 1,500 or so died on the Israeli side, and 5,000 plus have already died on the Palestinian side. Now, let's shift the issue a little bit because USA, for no reason, saying that, Osama bin Laden was in Iraq, attacked them, and so many hundreds of thousands of civilians died, and the whole thing was infrastructure was destroyed, and then they captured the oil. Same thing was done with Libya. Same thing with Afghanistan, that Osama bin Laden is there. Though finally he is found in Pakistan, living like a normal family man. And it is very clear that USA was paying to the Pakistanis for taking care of the Taliban or against Taliban and so on. And then they signed with Taliban, ditched the earlier government, and now have still not recognized them and have put sanctions on them. Now, this is not understandable, that how can a great power like USA fight with Taliban? It's really not fighting with Taliban, it is destroying the civilian population. So, and then in the end say that we will shake hands with Taliban. They were the enemy yesterday. This is the Doha Accords, right? And then not recognize the government and pull the rug out of the earlier government, who have to run away. And so much corruption becomes obvious. Where did all the equipment and the guns and so on of the USA go? Because they ran away in a hurry also. Now, will that lead to peace?